In this video, we're going to do a brief overview of the anatomy of the male reproductive system. So in this image, you can see a lateral view of the male reproductive system. And you can see that there are two external organs to the male reproductive tract, and those consist of the penis here and the testes, or testis if you're just talking about one, but males have two testes, so two of these. Now, the testes are the major functioning organs of the male reproductive system because these are going to be producing testosterone, which is their major sex hormone, and they're also going to be producing the male gamete, which is the sperm cell. So they're going to have the most function in terms of reproductive function in the male reproductive tract. Now, coming up from the testes, this is where the sperm cells are made and mature. You can see there is a duct system that will carry those sperm cells to the outside of the body. So the first part of this duct is called the epididymis. It's this comma-shaped region directly behind the testis. And then coming off of the epididymis, we have the ductus deferens, which will run up and over top of the bladder of the male. And then the ductus deferens will empty into this duct here called the ejaculatory duct, along with secretions from the seminal vesicle, this little gland right here. So the seminal vesicle is going to be producing about 60% of semen. Semen are that's the fluid material that's getting secreted from the penis during ejaculation. The seminal vesicles produce about 60% of that. And one of the functions of the seminal vesicle is to produce those secretions and provide nutrients to these sperm cells as they are on their journey towards potentially the female reproductive tract. Now, once we get into this ejaculatory duct, you will see that it passes through the prostate, this organ right here. The prostate will also produce secretions for the semen. This gland will produce about 30% of the volume of the semen. And it produces more milky secretions that are really there to help activate the sperm cells and kind of get them ready to start swimming, because they're going to have to swim to potentially make it to an egg cell in the female reproductive tract. From there, once we pass through that ejaculatory duct, we then get down into the urethra. And the urethra has two purposes for the male. It's going to serve a urinary function in that it's going to allow urine to leave the body. So you can see this is the urinary bladder up here. Urine would exit through this urethra to the outside of the body. But it also is going to be carrying semen, right? They're including those sperm cells to the outside of the body as well. And so there are three different regions to the male urethra. We have the first part of the male urethra up here, which is the prostatic urethra. It passes through the prostate. Then we have what's called the spongy urethra, which passes through, the membranous urethra, which is going to pass through the pelvic floor and pass through right next to this bulbourethral gland here, which we'll get to what that is in just a second. And then we have the spongy urethra, which is also known as the penile urethra. And this is the longest part of the urethra because it has to pass through the full length of the penis. So overall, the male urethra is around 8 inches long, which is much longer than we see in the female body. The female urethra is only about 1 inch long. So that is the pathway that the sperm cells will use to exit the body. And again, we talked about these seminal vesicles, which produce secretions to help form those sperm. About 60% of the sperm produced by these, 60% of the semen is produced by these seminal vesicles, and then about 30% of the semen is going to be produced by the prostate. We will also have some secretions produced by these little bulbourethral glands that are found kind of on either side of that membranous urethra. And these tiny bulbourethral glands will produce a clear, kind of sticky mucus-like secretion that will actually come out before the semen exit the body. So these are going to be produced these secretions are going to be produced during sexual arousal, and that's going to help provide lubrication for sexual intercourse, and it's going to help clean out this urethra and neutralize the urethra of any urine that might have been present inside of that urethra. We want to clean all of the urine out to help neutralize the pH of the urethra so that the sperm cells will not be harmed during your journey. And those bulbourethral glands produce those secretions for that. So again, these secretions will come out before the semen are ready to exit the body. Now looking at some of the external anatomy, we already mentioned we have the testes, 2 of these, and the penis. Looking at the testes a little closer, they're going to be enclosed in a sac of skin called the scrotum, which you'll notice is housed outside of the body, and that's because the testes actually function better at a lower temperature than what our body temperature is. Sperm production is going to happen, or it's going to be more efficient at a temperature that is actually 2 degrees Celsius cooler than the pelvic cavity. So this is why the testicles are housed outside of the body, is to make sure that the temperature is a little bit cooler to give males more efficient sperm production. We also have what's called males also have what's called the spermatic cord, which is going to hold the testes in place and attach it to the body, and we will see a better view of the spermatic cord in a later image. Looking at the penis, on the end of the penis we have what's called the glands of the penis. That's this enlarged portion at the end. And surrounding the glands of the penis, they have what's called a prepuce, also known as a foreskin. The prepuce can be removed during circumcision if the male chooses, or if it was done when they were an infant. But if that prepuce remains intact, this is an uncircumcised penis, so this has the prepuce still intact. Let's take a look at a different view of the male reproductive system. So here we can see the penis again. You can see this spongy erectile tissue on the outside of the penis, which can be engorged with blood during sexual arousal. You can see the urethra running through the penis. So this is a spongy urethra here. Again, we have the membranous urethra, which travels kind of alongside of those bulbourethral glands. And then we have the prostatic urethra, which travels through the prostate. You can see those seminal vesicles, which are helping to produce those secretions to form the semen. Prostate will also be doing this, and those bulbourethral glands, remember, will produce the secretions that come out before the semen to clean out that urethra. Wrapping around from where the seminal vesicles are, you can see we have the ductus deferens here, this long tube-like structure, and that wraps around to the epididymis, this comma-shaped structure, which you can see kind of funnels into the inside of the testes. And the functioning portions of the testes are called seminiferous tubules. If you look inside of the testis, you will see that it's divided into these structures called lobules. So there's different little sections in here. These are lobules. And inside of the lobules, you will see about 2 to 3 seminiferous tubules. So we'll look at another testis in just a second and look at a better view of that and a large view of that. So here's that larger view of the testis where you can see those lobules, the sectioned off regions inside of the testis. And those lobules are divided by septa, one septum or multiple septa, dividing these lobules up in the testes. And then inside of the lobules you can see those twisted up, coiled up seminiferous tubules. So these are the actual parts of the testes that produce the sperm cells. And then those sperm cells get collected in the reaped testes, and then from there they will gather into the epididymis and finally pass through the ductus deferens. So we will talk more about how those sperm cells are produced in a later video. We'll take a look at that and talk about their journey to the outside of the male reproductive tract. So here you can see that external anatomy of the male reproductive tract. You can see the spermatic cord here, which is the structure that holds the testes in place and attaches them to the body. If a male ever gets a vasectomy, they will have to have this spermatic cord opened up, and the ductus deferens will be cut and either cauterized or clamped off to prevent the sperm cells from being able to get to the outside of the body. So they're essentially cutting this ductus deferens to prevent those sperm cells from exiting. So that is a form of birth control that males can get. That again, where they have to cut into the spermatic cord and snip that little ductus deferens there to prevent the sperm cells from exiting the body. This cremaster over here, you can see, is the muscle of the spermatic cord, and so it has the ability to contract whenever the male gets really cold, and that will essentially pull the testes up closer to the body in response to cold so that the testes can remain warm and not get too cold, because if they get too cold, that can also be damaging to the sperm cells. Now let's look at the anatomy of the penis a little bit closer. You can see that there are two regions to the penis. You have the shaft and then what's called the glans penis, which is the end here that is a little bit enlarged. And again, the glans is going to have an opening, an external urethral orifice, which will allow both urine and sperm cells to be able to exit the body. Now on the surface of the glans, this is where the prepuce could be. This is the, again, known as the foreskin, which could cover the glans of the penis. If the male is circumcised, then that prepuce will have been removed and will not be present anymore. We also have spongy erectile tissue inside of the penis, and you'll see that there are three different partitions of this. We have what's called the corpus cavernosum on the kind of dorsal and lateral sides of the penis, and then they have this corpus spongiosum on the ventral side of the penis, which you can see encloses the urethra. And so this spongy tissue has these little sinuses in it called lacunae, which can fill with blood during sexual arousement, and that's what will cause erection of the penis during sexual arousement. So erection of the penis allows for the male to be able to have sexual intercourse and to potentially ejaculate and introduce sperm into the female reproductive tract, which would essentially allow for reproduction if the female were ovulating, and we will talk about what that means in a later video.